You have tuned in to the E-commerceaholic. My name is TJ Gamble, and I am here to help you get more from your e-commerce store. So if you're looking to expand your e-commerce knowledge, whether you're a merchant looking to build that powerhouse e-commerce brand, or you're otherwise employed in e-commerce and looking to deliver world-class, enterprise-grade e-commerce services, consider hitting that subscribe button. We're here to help. This week, I wanted to talk about social proof, which is an interesting thing I see continuing to expand and grow in e-commerce. It's something that I didn't really notice. I mean, it's been around. It's in the psychology of getting people to purchase things, but outside of reviews, it was something I didn't see a ton of until a couple of years ago. And I came across a company, Banana Stand IO at the time, that was doing some interesting things with social proof, particularly on Magento. I think they've expanded to many other platforms. So I reached out to Banana Stand and said, let's get on the stream. Let's talk about social proof. And Jay was so kind enough to accept our invitation to come on to talk about this topic. Since then, it's been rebranded as Farah. So, Jay, if you would introduce yourself and kind of give us the elevator pitch on Farah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to talk about this. It's something I'm really passionate about. So, Farah is effectively a digital salesperson for e-commerce. It helps online stores sell more by effectively playing what the role of a salesperson would be in a retail store, but online. We used to be Banana Stand IO, and we were just rebranding to Farah.ai, and the reason why we did that is because we are starting to interface a little bit more with customers, and we want to start to allow our platform to learn from customers so that we can start to allow it to modify the experience in real time and maximize sales for a merchant.
So how recent was the rebranding? I mean, when I reached out, I mean, it was still Banana Stand as far as I know, so it's been a matter of days or weeks at this point, right?
Yeah, so it's been about, I think we officially rebranded about 2 weeks ago. So it's super fresh. But yeah, it's a natural progression. It's something that we knew we would do eventually. If you followed like the previous company I was CEO of was originally Sweet Tooth, and then rebranded to Smile. And so this was a similar type of progression where we kind of start with something that's a little bit out there, and then as we kind of understand more of where we need to be, and then we brand that way.
So is the rebranding more, I mean, is it a vision toward offer more services? Is that why you're kind of, changing up that branding? Or at this point, is it really just you want to tighten that up, go with something, a little smaller, maybe, redefine what the company is? Or is it an eye toward additional services?
So our long-term goal, where I see we'll be able to make the greatest impact for the independent retailer, is to effectively become sort of like the Alexa for the independent retailer. And in the future, we will only ever want to get information on our own and want to have access to it immediately, without having to interface with anybody and have it always be 100% correct. And so kind of moving into this reality where we have the ability to access anything at any time, no matter where we are. And with Farah, where we launched, it was kind of an urgency and social proof platform. And what it's become is effectively a digital salesperson, and what it will become and where we're headed towards is for it to become sort of like a full-on digital salesperson that can effectively not only sell better to customers, but also be able to help them and connect with other systems that do help them and learn about customers, and then modify the experience as it goes. So really, what that kind of like personal touch that a salesperson would have in a retail store, we kind of want to move to that. And as we kind of move to that, the name Banana Stand is kind of tough to to talk to if you were to talk to Banana Stand. And so when we become something that you can talk to, being able to say, hey, Farah, how many of these do you have in stock, is a lot easier than Banana Stand. How much do you have these in stock?
Yeah, I definitely want to get more into your vision of, how that online salesperson would work. But first, I want to, kind of dive into the topic, and then we'll come back to Farah and your plans for it later on in the live stream. We're talking about social proof, which to the merchants I talk to, not many of them are putting a whole lot of thought into how to effectively leverage social proof to increase their sales. So if you would kind of, give our viewers a definition of what social proof is and why it's important for their e-commerce site.
Okay, so social proof is the trust that a customer or somebody builds based on what they see other people doing. And I can drill into why this is very important on like a psychological level, or I could just talk about it on a high level. Do you want me to go into like the psych of it, or do you want me to
Yeah, just to clarify, the market we're serving here are, educated, experienced entrepreneurs or, people that work in e-commerce. We're not here to go after the crowd that's just trying to figure out how to drop ship some stuff on Shopify. That's not who we're going after. So we want to provide some value here. So we're definitely not afraid to get technical and get our hands dirty and really to dive into it. I believe I'm definitely more interested in the details of the psychology, and I believe our audience would be as well.
Okay, excellent, because that's what I'm really excited to talk about. So if you look back at kind of how humans used to interact with each other, we're always social creatures. That's, any psychologist or sociologist will tell you that's true. That's something that we've kind of established that we know about ourselves. But a recent finding that we've found, and a lot of this is written about in the book Emotional Intelligence and Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which are two really groundbreaking psych books for the psych and development community. But what we've learned is that our ability to decide, or our brain's decision to decide whether or not we should trust or not trust something, is not only something that we've kind of evolved with, but it's actually something that our brain is wired to, even beyond our own conscious. And how, the explanation of this is basically as follows. So we've got like this kind of middle part in our brain, which is called the amygdala. And we have the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala handles our fight or flight responses, and the prefrontal cortex handles our, almost everything else that we really are conscious about. So the interesting thing is that the amygdala isn't a conscious part of our brain. It's a part of our brain that typically does things without us even knowing, and where the prefrontal cortex is where we actually process what we're seeing, process like what's happening. And what scientists have been able to find and have confirmed now is that we are able, that there is a route from our vision directly to our amygdala that allows us to process what we see, and certain things that we see. It allows us to send those signals directly to the amygdala and bypass the prefrontal cortex as the initial kind of route. So what that means and why we evolved to have this was because it basically means that you could see something, you could react on it and feel a certain way, and not even know what you saw yet, or even have conceived what it was you saw and why it made you feel that way. And the reason why we evolved this way was because in the kind of like old days, when we would be in our kind of packs or groups or whatever, we would have fight or flight responses that were based on what reaction we would see on somebody's face. So if we saw somebody in the pack create a scared face like that, our prefrontal our ability to react at kind of fraction of a second notice and book it and run meant whether or not we survived or not. And as a result, we evolved to have the ability to process what our social community is reacting to something and feel a certain way without even knowing that's happening. So how does that relate to social proof? Well, it means that social proof is something that we are hardwired. It's an innate effect on how humans make decisions. And the crazy thing is, it's even decisions that they don't even know they're making. So this is where social proof can be incredibly powerful, is that if you can create social proof effectively, customers don't know that you're creating that social proof. They just feel better about buying the product, and the result, which we test with A/B tests, okay, ends up meaning that that you sell a lot more, and that your conversion rate actually increases very much. Yeah, so that's the long-winded explanation of how important, kind of how social proof kind of came to be, why we have this thing of social proof.
Yeah,
That
that's
makes
a great.
sense?
Yeah, that's a great explanation actually. And because I know a lot of people that tend to have emotional responses to things, and then they just make up some logic to justify however they feel, and that's pretty much what we do lots of times when shopping. Shopping is an emotional experience, so these small cues and this social proof allows them to have a positive emotional response to the information on the page, and then they, that if it was a negative emotional response, then it might keep them from purchasing. But having these positive reinforcements allows them to subconsciously continue forward with that transaction. That's pretty much a
Yeah, that's
simpler
exactly.
recap? Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly the truth. So people will buy things and be interested in things that even they don't even know. It's even more important to have social proof in some cases before even explaining what the product is. Because if I were to tell you that Warren Buffett and I could simply tell you Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs all did this every single morning, and before I even tell you what it is, you could be thinking to yourself, maybe I should do that, And but then I could tell you what it is, and it might be something absolutely absurd. But you've still created this social proof because you have you've associated a trust with what it works for them, it must work for me. So yeah, what you said is you hit the nail on the head there.
So let's talk about some of the ways that you add social proof to an e-commerce website. This is an e-commerce audience, and I believe your product is kind of aimed at e-commerce. So let's talk about some of the things that you do to generate that social proof, and if you have it, maybe some background on what that particular type of social proof is trying to trigger.
Yeah. So there are lots of ways to drive social proof. By far most common way is reviews. Seems like it's not, it seems obvious, but any kind of reviews add social proof because we see, at least other people are buying this product. Now with reviews, some people use photos in their reviews, and that makes a big difference. So I highly recommend using any kind of photo review software that increases social proof. With Farah, you have the ability to show a feed of recent customer actions. So when customers are actually shopping around a product, you can actually show those actions embedded into your product page. So without using any kind of pop-ups, there are some apps that'll do social proof through pop-ups, but I typically try to stay away from them because I just feel like customers don't like pop-ups. I don't like them, so I don't like putting them on a site, and I think it might hurt brand. But there are other ways of the other ways of showing social proof would be like also showing people that are viewing a product. This works really well from a social proof stance on the product listing page, and I think that I don't think there are any other apps that can do this, but Farah has the ability to show the number of people who are viewing a product in the product listing page. So if you're browsing a collection of products, a category, you can see that, hey, 7 people are looking at this product. And we find that when customers see that, they're just like more likely to look at the product, because they're like, it's almost like that effect of, people huddling around a product, and we're just creating that digitally effectively. You could also show recent purchaser counts, although that's not as effective as you would think unless it is a very unique product and you've already built up trust in other ways. Influencers are an incredibly powerful way to drive social proof. Those are testimonials. I'm sure there are a lot of other ways, but those are like some of the ways that I can think of off the top of my head that I've seen merchants do really well with social proof.
Now, as far as influencers go, a lot of people, I'm always on YouTube doing stuff. You've got influencer marketing. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where you get a well-known person, or are you talking about maybe a more subtle influencer marketing?
So you can, when I talk about influencer marketing would be, actually trying to get people to know about your brand using the influencers. Now, when you do that, you're getting some social proof out of it. So that's part of the reason why it's such an effective means of marketing usually. But what we recommend to our merchants that are using influencer marketing is to kind of keep, like, you've almost like paid a premium to get the social proof of this influencer for this marketing, and that's what makes it so effective. So utilize it on your store as well. So within the shopping experience, show whenever you have let's say you've had your influencer push a couple products, then you should show that influencer in those products, like put their picture, put their Instagram handle or whatever social media you're using, and say, hey, it's recommended by this product by this person, or as reviewed by this person. And when customers see somebody they recognize, it's way more effective in terms of social proof than it is to say, just some other random person. So when you create social proof, I guess the last thing I'll just add on to this is you're always kind of thinking about a couple things. The first thing is that, is this person relatable? So there's no point if I tell you that, let's say, 7 grandmothers in China purchased this product, and it's a product you're looking at, these headphones. Yeah, it can actually create a negative effect on social proof. So it has to be somebody relatable to your target audience. Number 2 is that it's more effective when it's somebody who people know. And that's why the influencer side of things can be really effective, is a lot of times it's somebody who's relatable and somebody who they've already been they've already had some sort of contact with or had seen. And the last thing is it needs to be memorable. So that one can be done in different ways, but just showing smaller things, it's not going to be as memorable throughout the process. You kind of need to do something where you kind of need to make the person feel that trust, like throughout the whole checkout process, like right to the end.
Right. And some of these features, I was kind of going through the features that you provide in your platform, and a lot of them are social proof, but a lot of them center around creating urgency as well, which is obviously a little different but related topic. So do you have any maybe recommendations for methods to create urgency to get those buyers to go ahead and do it now, and maybe any particular examples where someone created urgency and has improved their conversions?
Yeah. So the reason why we launched the platform with kind of 2 things originally last year was that we launched it with urgency and social proof, because I really believe that those 2 things go hand in hand. And you can explain an example is that if I told you that, hey, 7 people are looking at this product, or 7 other people like you are looking at this product, you might say, okay, yeah, that's okay. And then if I told you there's only 1 left, and we sold a lot last week, and 7 people like you or 7 of your friends are looking at this product, then you might be a little more kind of, okay, wait, there's only 1 left, and people like me are buying this. Like, I need to probably think about this. So that's kind of the reason why we kind of added the urgency side of things. And as we move kind of more to being like to being more like the sales sales platform for e-commerce, the digital salesperson for e-commerce. That's like, we're going to introduce lots of different ways to improve sales in different in kind of other ways adjacent to that. But going back to the urgency thing, so there are a lot of ways to add urgency in the checkout. The important thing to note is that you don't want to add too much urgency, and urgency isn't for every merchant. So two notes: it's not for every merchant, and if you are going to use it, be careful when you use it and how you use it, and how often you use it. And so the example of where it's really effective is when you have a product. So let's say you're looking at a product page and you know that customers approve of this product, and you know that you've added that kind of social proof. You know that there's not a big trust issue here, but you're realizing that when in your research that customers just are getting to a point where they're saying, it's great, it's a good price, but I can get it tomorrow, right? Maybe I'll come back tomorrow, check it out again. That's kind of like where people are on that like edge, and that's where urgency is the most effective without doing any kind of like damage, without adding negative pressure. So the way to add urgency in a very positive way is to let people know why you're adding that urgency. And with Farah, there are a couple ways to add urgency, and they almost always will tie into letting the customer know why we're adding the urgency, and that in order to make them more effective and not hurt the brand. So one example is to use a feature that we have, which is like a get it by timer. So every single one of Amazon's products, and when we look at Amazon, you have to realize, they're 49% of all e-commerce now. So like if they're doing it, you should be like, it shouldn't even be something you think about. Like you should be doing it. But there's a feature in Farah called Get It By Timer, where Farah will display a timer that says how long the person has to purchase the product in order to get it on the next available ship date. So it'll say the same thing as what you see on Amazon with, order it in the next 2 hours and get it by Friday. Farah has the ability to do that. That's a great way to create urgency, because if I was looking at let's say, I was going to say if I'm looking at a dress, but if somebody was looking at a dress and they were going to a wedding and they knew they had a wedding coming up, they may see a dress they really like and say, okay, that's a great dress. It's really nice. I would love to get that dress, but say, the wedding's in a couple weeks. But then you show a get it by timer that tells them, hey, you need to order this in the next 13 hours or in the next 3 hours, and we'll be able to get it to you by May 23rd. Then as a customer, you would think to yourself that, wait, the wedding's on the 26th, so I got to order it today. And that's a case where adding urgency is actually helpful to a customer, and a customer would look at that positively, and it doesn't hurt the brand. Another way that we see a lot of merchants adding urgency, and again, you can do this with Farah, is by creating a timer in the checkout and in the shopping cart. This one's a little tough in terms of brand, so I don't recommend it for every merchant. And I'll explain why, and I'll explain the examples. I'll let you know what examples of where it doesn't work or where it's not recommended. But basically, it just says something like check out in the next 5 minutes, and just to make sure you don't lose your order. And the fact is, most e-commerce stores don't have inventory holding functionality built in. So the truth is, yeah, they could lose their order if you run out of stock. For the drop shipping stores, it's not the case for them as much, but for a lot of other stores, especially clothing stores and ones that have limited sizes and limited in some sort of limited quantity, it is something that is worth considering for a customer. And the only thing we say is just to make sure it's congruent, and make sure that it's not a random timer. It's not clearly something that's just putting needless pressure on the customer, and it's something that and when I say congruent, just make sure it goes into the checkout, and that if the customer does any other actions, it gives them more time to continue through. But the net result on adding these two things can be up to about 25-30%, believe it or not, on increase in conversions. The average merchant probably sees about like a 10-15%, but it can get pretty high. And so the last thing I just want to say is, back to what I said, is it's not for urgency. Driving urgency is not for everybody. And an example would be like a yoga store. Let's say you had a brand that's about kind of like the Zen, the yoga attitude, then in those cases, you typically don't want to be putting timers on your site, because that's just not congruent with your brand.
Right.
The get it by timers you might do, but even those, any kind of timer, it's not something you want to do. There are a couple other examples that we don't recommend putting much pressure on urgency, but for the majority of brands, it really helps and it makes a big difference.
So you always want to make sure, if you're creating urgency, it's positive reinforcement. It's urgency, it's information to help the purchaser. It's, you can get it by this time, or man, we've only got one of these left and a lot of people are looking at it. You might want to go ahead and buy it now if you really want it. Those kinds of reinforcements, rather than doing anything negative or maybe obtrusive.
Yeah, exactly. And you talked about only having only having one left, and other people are looking at it. That's something you could do with Bear as well, which is it's an easy way to if you've only got one left, I think it's pointless not to say that. Now again, it depends on brand. So like, for example, it may be a product that is something that somebody wants to, maybe it's a clothing item that somebody wants to be like other people, and you only got one left. They're going to say, well, I'm going to be the only one with this. I don't want to be the only one with this. Or on the other side, we've seen companies that have very unique product lines, like, custom print shirts. And it works really well for them, because those people are going in to buy the shirts and they want to wear that sweater or whatever with the giant surfing cat or whatever that nobody else has. And when you say that, we only have one left, it makes a huge difference for them versus not saying that, because then they would think, oh, well, I might buy it and somebody else, my neighbor, might get the same shirt, my dorm neighbor or whatever. So yeah, social proof can have a negative effect. Just like anything, and even social proof can have a negative effect if done incorrectly. But it's kind of like a very powerful tool that every merchant needs to consider.
So I wanted to talk about a couple of things you mentioned when you were going through that. You mentioned specifically checkout timers, and I was trying to book a hotel the other day, and it gave me this, complete your order in the next 30 minutes to reserve this room you've got in your cart, basically. So I've seen companies like that use checkout timers to their advantage, but outside of that, have you seen anyone in a more typical e-commerce retail experience effectively use checkout timers?
I can't think of a very large brand that's using it yet, but across our merchants, there's thousands that are using it, and it is affecting their sales positively. So the thing to understand about kind of these about the travel sites is kind of to understand, why do they use them? Well, for them, they do have limited quantity, and it's generally known that whatever they're selling has some sort of limit. And the reason why they incorporate those types of things, notice that they use a lot of social proof as well in very specific ways, and that their sites are extremely well optimized, is because if we take a step back in 10, 15 years, retail shifted online sort of slowly. To anybody in the industry, it moved slowly. To people that aren't in the industry, kind of probably were like, oh my God, it was overnight. But it shifted slower compared to other industries. If we look at the travel industry, how that shifted online, it was like overnight. That was like a couple, 2-3 years, until almost, most of the travel industry ended up being online. And what happened to those travel companies was that they realized very quickly that they were already adding urgency in their physical locations of these travel places, and when they went online, they lost all of it. And they had already optimized, decades of intelligence at getting good at adding urgency, and then they went online, they lost it all. So they were super quick to add in urgency into their experience because they just knew that they had to recover the same conversion rates that they had in their physical locations and had no choice but to do so. So I think my belief is that as more merchants add urgency, it's just going to increase the need for urgency against other customers, because as the cost of acquiring customer increases, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's going to get harder to acquire a customer, so you need to maximize that conversion rate. And in the case of the travel companies, they had no choice. They were cutting their conversion rates in like a tenth, overnight, where e-commerce stores are kind of slowly cutting their conversion rate into over time. So yeah, I mean, so I guess to answer your question, a lot of our merchants are using it effectively, but it's I guess I can't say like any particular really big companies yet are using it, other than travel and travel companies. But I'm sure we will see a whole bunch incorporating it as they start to try to compete against the Amazons in the world.
I understand. And you had mentioned the order now or order within the next 30 minutes to receive this product on whatever date. How do you accomplish that in your system? Is it tied to shipping? What if we've got complex shipping rules? Like what are the requirements around setting that up and making sure it's accurate? Because once you make that promise, you damn well better deliver it.
Yeah. So I'll touch on your kind of what you just mentioned about making that promise and delivering on it on the end. But the way it works in Farah is you define like a shipping table, and we have a rule system that allows you to also specify when that will show, when it won't show, what type of messaging it shows based on country, right down to the city, even if the customer hasn't logged in or ever purchased anything. So that's kind of like the intelligence behind like the Farah systems. It really can be smart about when it shows this type of messaging. It's not just a timer that you just add in everywhere. But yeah, so I mean, I guess that answers your question. You just create a shipping table, you specify which locations and how long or the range that it takes you to ship to that, and then Farah kind of detects based on who's visiting, their IP address, their location, what they've done on the site. It knows it'll or any other information they provide on the site. It'll actually be able to like make sure it only shows it when it's relevant and when it knows it's right. And it has a fallback system too. It'll fall back on different strategies which you define in the event that it doesn't, that the customer, that it's not confident that it can show this type of like a get it by timer to that customer. Really quickly, just based on your you better deliver if you're telling them you can ship it by. Yes, I agree that that's a thing that's very surprisingly enough based on our data is that customers seem to forget by the time they got to the checkout when they were assuming they get it. And if you think back to the times you've purchased things on, let's say, Amazon, and as working in the e-commerce industry, as ashamed we are to say that we still shop on Amazon, it's good to look at what they're doing. But you'll notice probably if you can think about the times when you've seen the get it by timer on their site, you probably don't remember that date by the time you get to the last step of the checkout, especially if you're buying multiple products, because those might have different get it by timer times. So it's actually a really effective tool, even if it isn't totally accurate. Although with Farah, that aside, with Farah, we make sure that it is accurate to avoid that ever situation where you do have a return as a result of it not getting received by a customer because they didn't look at the final ship date or something.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. And I guess that's what it boils down to. If you're just buying it, if you're just trying to get someone over the edge, then it's probably not that big of a deal, even if it doesn't arrive on that date. Where it becomes a problem is like me always waiting to the last minute to order something because I need it next Tuesday.
Yeah, sorry, to be clear there, I mean the as long as you show the final ship date on the checkout page. Like you can't just ship it to them immediately. I mean, show the final ship, but if it's not the same as what was there, most customers won't even remember by that time. At least that's what we see in our data. To our surprise, it is something that we ended up making the system so it didn't have that problem. But in merchants that did have that problem, we ran the numbers and realized, oh wow, it didn't actually make that much of a difference because people couldn't remember. You know, it would have said, you know, you get it by Friday, and then they may get to the checkout, and then because of some other more complicated rule that the UPS or something is down because of a snowstorm or something, it might predict a different date, and it didn't make as much difference, but definitely show that and make it accurate.
And by the way, if you're watching and you're live, you know, we're live right now, go ahead and feel free to post any questions you have in the chat. We will get to those as soon as you post them. If you happen to be catching this in replay, post any questions you may have down in the comments of the video. I'll do everything I can to get those answered. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the eCommerceaholic family. So for the international, readjusting your camera there. Okay. For the international market, are there any GDPR concerns or otherwise around using some of the user data? Like, you know, so many people are viewing this, or so many people watch this, or, you know, on some sites, Joe from Ohio just bought this product. Any GDPR concerns internationally with those types of functions?
With the GDPR, they were mainly concerned with people storing data about what you do without your knowledge and without your ability to remove it. So as long as you fit within those constraints, in order to comply, we need to know our experience based on what actions you're collecting about what they do on that site, and two, means to erase that data, which is by I think by August 15th, every app in store will have the ability to delete all that data through an endpoint if a customer requests it. I think as long as you fit within those, you follow those two constraints, then you're generally okay. Yeah, the key thing with tracking that I always tell merchants is don't like control.
I think you're breaking up a little bit there for me, Jay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah, it just comes and goes. Like it's good for 30 seconds, and then it's not so good for about 10. It looks like you've completely froze at this point. So y'all get to look at me now. So I'll give you a second there, Jay, to see if you can get that issue corrected. Again, submit any questions. Next week, we're going to be talking about mobile first design. We're going to have a team member on from JH, which is the Magento agency over in the UK that has won the Best Mobile Design Award at Imagine for 3 consecutive years. So who else better to have on to talk about mobile first e-commerce design than JH? So be sure to join us, hit the subscribe button, go over to, on the channel, you could find that live stream, and you can set an alert notification to be reminded of when we go live, which is just about every Friday at 2 p.m. So if you would continue there, I don't know exactly where you were in that talk, but you know, we were talking about GDPR around that data usage.
Yeah, so basically I was just saying that you need to make sure that your customers have control over their own data. And that's really where the concern of GDPR comes along, is that when people feel like they're not in control of stuff that's about them, they feel uncomfortable. And so, you have to notify people that you're tracking it and that you're collecting information about them in order to improve their experience. And you have to give them the ability to delete it. And as long as you're falling within those constraints, then you're generally okay to do everything that FARA lets you do. Basically GDPR just complicates it because now you have to ask and think about how you're going to allow them to delete it. But it makes sense. I mean, it's understandable.
So does FARA offer the ability, I'm assuming, to purge that information about the user if someone requests that everything a merchant tracks or has tracked about them be removed?
Yeah, we sync with the e-commerce platform anyways. So if it gets removed from the e-commerce platform, then we cascade. But yeah, and actually, so Shopify is going to be incorporating really strict controls soon against every app, and I think every store by August 15th they have to comply with full GDPR, or I'm assuming they'll get shut down. And Shopify hasn't messed around with that before, so heads up.
That's good to know. And what's your pricing structure for FARA?
Today we price based on a gain in revenue that we're able to show with an A/B test. So we're pretty confident that the things that we do, or the things that FARA does, are effective at increasing sales for a merchant and increasing their conversion rate. So we priced our product around basically saying that we will take a percentage of the increase in revenue that we are able to prove with science, basically. So we think it's just a very fair model, and it seems like our merchants are happy because if they make, they're making a lot more money than they were before, then they're just paying us a small percentage of what that is, which is just the 3%.
So
we also have a free plan for startups.
Okay, so smaller merchants is free, and then once you start getting to a certain threshold, you begin to get charged. How does that work?
Yeah, basically, if you make over $1,000 a month, then you fall into one of our paid plans, and currently our highest tier is just the $49 a month plus 3% of gained revenue. Gained revenue as a result of Banana Stand or FARA. Still saying it.
It takes a while to get used to the new name, right? Mm-hmm. So as far as like an A/B test to determine pricing, is that something you do up front, or is that an ongoing thing to, say I'm continuously improving my website and making my, my product detail pages convert better? Is that an ongoing A/B test, or do you do that once and then I have to request another one? What does that look like?
So we typically do like a trial period or a pilot period with merchants, and then we'll run an A/B test with them and figure out what skills or kind of tools that we want to use within the store, what skills FARA should use, and then we figure out the results. We see what the conversion rate increase was, and then we use that to calculate what the gain in revenue will be, and then we kind of set the pricing based on that. So if your sales, so if you manage to increase your conversions in other ways, it doesn't materially affect the pricing, because it's running it's running like a blind test. So if you're doing other things while that test is running, it still doesn't kind of nullify the data that says it. So we typically tell merchants, though, over like, a few months, like 6 months, to run other tests to see kind of what is the difference, what is the current difference that's happening versus what happened 6 months ago. Because sometimes the website experience changes, and it may have a diminishing effect. However, we're always improving it. So usually what merchants find is actually improved the conversion rate. But yeah, so it's something we kind of like stamp it, say, okay, this is the increase in conversions we're able to produce, and then they can run another A/B test to check again, basically.
So what platforms do you currently support, and how difficult is it to get your service set up and going on any of the platforms? You've got the SaaS platforms, you've got Magento. Is it a module install? Like how what do you support, and how much work is it to get that going?
Um, so on Shopify, it's one click, and on BigCommerce, it's pretty much one click. We just kind of launched on BigCommerce, and for most stores, it's one click, to be clear. For Magento, we're planning on rolling that out. We ran a pilot with a couple merchants, but that were successful. We found that it was a little bit too hard to manage the multiple different platforms with the massive growth of Shopify. We were trying to at one point deal with 100 new merchants a day, so we had to kind of pause our Magento integration support and our custom integration support. So as of today, mainly it works with Shopify and BigCommerce, and we're working on launching officially to Magento and to custom platforms. And to answer your question, so for Shopify and BigCommerce, pretty much one click, and you're good to go. And then if where it comes along is like the customization, making it look nicer, making it not look like every other site, and that's typically, if you're in our bigger plans, we'll do that for you for free anyways. And then for the other platforms, how it will work is well, for Magento, it'll just be you install the extension. For custom platforms, there's basically, you just have to install our kind of like JavaScript tracker thing. And then you also have to send us events when shoppers do things that you want to be able to react upon. So, on orders, or add to carts, or viewing products, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So I had one question submitted. Chris is sending in this question. He said he's having a little trouble posting in the actual YouTube chat, but his question was, do you think that physical stores like Target, Walmart, any of the big box stores will ever implement digital displays in their stores to alert customers to a rating of a product? Or I'm going to expand that. Do you think that we will see more cross-use of digital social proof in an actual physical retail location?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we haven't seen it grown as much as we would have expected is simply because they haven't had to, is that they haven't really felt the pain of the shift of the market. And so, but today, with Amazon's absurdly fast growth and eating up the market, they are starting to feel the pain, and they are starting to realize that the modern shopper needs to have access to their own information in order to make their purchasing decision. And the days of being able to kind of artificially sell to a customer are almost gone. And perhaps this whole fake news debacle accelerated this process, and the Facebook scandal, it accelerated this process. But I would not be surprised if every major retailer had some way to access information about a product within the next 10 years in their retail location, whether that be by some sort of pad device, or some sort of voice communication, or something like that.
Thanks for the question, Chris. That was a great question. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. If you have one, get it in. We're getting up close to the end of the required time. If we go any longer, it's usually based on great questions, and we're here to provide value, so we'll stay longer to get those questions asked. So let's talk about the future of Farah a little bit. And you had mentioned early on that digital salesperson. So maybe expand on that a little bit. Give us some examples of what a digital salesperson might be, or might do, or might look like.
Okay, so when you were in if you think about retail 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's very different than what it was today. And one of the biggest changes is that um, is that it used to be kind of a human-driven market, where today it's sort of shopper-driven and um, uh, sorry, it used to be a sales-driven market. Now it's more of like the shopper has to kind of decide what product they want, and you have to kind of like make shoppers feel like they want that product. You can't just tell them they need that product. Um, and and this is going to be a bigger and bigger shift of where we see commerce go, um, because people want to get their own information and they don't want to be told anything. And the days of trusting, the high school kid who is working part-time at the Best Buy on like what product you should get are slowly coming to an end. And instead, we want to be able to look up the reviews online or see what other of our customers have bought the product, or ask an actual, like, an expert at the product who, reviews those products on a regular basis. And so our progression to Farah becoming a digital salesperson is based around this idea. It's based around the idea that people want to get their own information, and that if we are to create a modern salesperson, that modern salesperson needs to be something that acts automatically, and can engage with customers to be able to help them whenever they want to get helped, and kind of on their time. And our goal initially is to launch this online, and so we've been kind of drawing out like our sales features, and we're trying to partner up with a lot of different other apps and platforms to be able to incorporate into this kind of digital salesperson. So we could use things like loyalty points through Smile, or bring up reviews through like Yotpo on a particular product, or use Odesk to answer a typical customer question about inventory levels or whatever, or order status. But our goal is to make Farah this kind of helpful kind of person, like the AI person. That's why we have like the AI in the name, that can learn about each individual customer and help them as well, and just kind of build up this like intelligence that just never forgets about that customer, and can always grow with the customer. And I think that's a big missing point right now, with missing key component for the independent retailer today. If you look at what Amazon and a lot of the big retailers are doing with collecting information about what shoppers, or you as a shopper, are doing, that information is not going away. That information is being stored, and they're growing their business based on that. But today, the independent e-commerce merchant is not really leveraging that data. They're not really leveraging that data to change the experience for customers, or improve the experience, or increase the likelihood that a customer will buy by showing them more relevant products, or showing them, or knowing how the customer likes to shop and modifying the experience based on that. And so that's really where we see Farah going. And that's really the concept behind the digital salesperson. I really believe that in 30 or 40 years, the traditional salesperson in retail will be replaced by almost completely digital means.
And we have another question submitted here. I think we're getting a little bit out of social proof, but who am I to judge the questions? We're going to ask the questions, and we're going to talk about them. Another great question from Chris here, though. And his question is: for many different types of sales, customers may only consider buying a product if they can see it, feel it, interact with it. Have you seen any industry who successfully lessened this barrier by some strategy method? Is there any new technology that could break this barrier completely, like holograms, perhaps? And I would offer maybe augmented reality with the furniture industry, as far as some of the things that IKEA is doing, where you can just hold up your phone and see a vase on the shelf, or a couch in your living room, and things like that. But Jay, have you seen anyone do anything clever that helps lower that risk and push merchants forward, as far as the difficulty in selling products online and not actually being able to touch and feel them?
So I've seen a lot of custom companies try. um, uh, I don't think that retail, at least in the foreseeable future, until new technologies come out, um, I don't see retail. One second. Um, sorry, just a second. Um, I don't see retail being 100% replaced by e-commerce. I think that it'll get to 50%, and I think that's what generally experts believe. It'll hit 50% and sort of plateau a little bit because of that physical importance. So yeah, in terms of using technology to solve it, the only two things I can think of are being really smart about your return policy. Um, uh, Amazon Prime is an absolute like golden example of how how important getting a really good return policy is a very effective means of getting customers to overcome the barrier of trying things, because then they'll try it and they'll just return it. And it's more convenient to them than driving to the next store and returning it there. A company called Frank and Oak did something where they would continuously send you products from their store. It was like men's clothing, and you would just keep trying on stuff as part of the subscription and keep sending it back. And they've grown substantially since. I'm not sure how much of their growth is from the subscription box retail, but that was one way they did it. I've heard really good things about unboxing videos. I know it sounds like really cheesy, but apparently they've been like converting really well for a lot of people. And my theory is that it makes people feel like they just are putting themselves in the shoes of that person and trying to like make themselves feel like how it would feel to unbox that product, and or how it would feel to hold the product. A lot of those unboxing videos, they kind of hold it and they show you, it's very like handsy in that way, if that's the right word, handsy. um, so yeah, that's in terms of the augmented reality. I know Shopify is trying to do something. I know a lot of companies are trying to do. I've used them before, and I just felt like it was a lot of work to do something that didn't feel as realistic. But yeah, wallpaper companies are starting to use like that's a good way to use augmented reality. Because you can augment your room with an iPad and put up a different wallpaper really easily. I mean, there's like 100 apps that do that today, and that would get over the barrier of having to see that in person. And that's even better than going to a wallpaper store, because you literally get to see it in your room.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's
I don't
a
know. Sorry, that probably just doesn't answer the question very much, Chris. But
No,
it's
the wallpaper example is a great one. I hadn't thought about. I mean, paint stores. If you could just hold up the phone in a room and use augmented reality, videos as far as not being able to physically touch a product. The proper use of video like that. That's not necessarily new technology, but the unboxing video is fairly new. At least, I mean, I know it's been popular on YouTube for a couple of years now, at least. But not necessarily new technology, but there are definitely ways to accomplish this. The next question we have is from Mage Mail, and Mage Mail's question is. What are your thoughts on browse abandonment with SM retargeting? I'm going to assume social media retargeting, and what are some best practices? And I'm going to rephrase that question a little bit to make it apply to social proof. And if someone is on social media and you're linking to a product, or if you're retargeting and they land on a product page, is there any strategy maybe that could be implemented on that page to increase conversions from people coming off of a social media platform?
So if they came from Instagram and you know that, then if you remember back, like earlier on, I said that with social proof, it's always important to be congruent, because as soon as you lose trust in the social proof and people think it's fake or not accurate, or the person that's pushing the social proof is not accurate, then it actually has a negative effect. And so if they're coming from Instagram, then you're going to want to show them other Instagram like people that like that product, or that promote that product. So yeah, I can't, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, the question was basically, what are a browse abandonment with social media retargeting. So you get them to a page, they've already browsed the product or they've been to your site, and then you run some retargeting ads. So they're on Instagram or Facebook or wherever they may be, and they see an ad targeted at them because they've already been on your site or perhaps looked at the product. A lot of people will click and then they abandon. They look, they don't move forward with that product. It was enticing enough to get them to click over, but then they didn't do anything with it from there. So, is there some sort of social proof strategy that might help increase the number of people that actually add that into the cart and move through the process?
Any kind of social proof is is going to be more effective at, if they do get into the product, they do come back to the product, it's going to increase their conversion rate. So it's going to increase the likelihood that they're actually going to check out with it the second time. Not showing the same social proof is important. So I know with Farah, it won't show the same social proof to the same customer. And so if a customer hit a page, left, was retargeted, came back to the page, it's going to show other customers that are also buying that product or supporting that product. So that would be, I guess, one strategy from the social proof side of things. But the general thing with retargeting is that if you can be a little more, if you can be a little, I don't want to use the word smarter about the retargeting, then basically smarter about retargeting than just I visited this page, therefore I'm going to advertise you the same product a million times, then you can really create an incredible experience for that customer. And I've seen a few merchants do this, but basically you should be looking at whether or not the customer has added that product to their cart as well, and retarget those products way more aggressively than them just clicking on it. Another thing you can do is you could see how long the person has been on the page, and then pipe that into your advertising, into your advertising algorithms, and use that to retarget those products because they've spent a certain amount of time on the page, as opposed to just clicking through. So I think just being a little more selective about who you retarget to will make a big difference in the effectiveness of a retargeting campaign.
And we've got another question here from Mage Mail. I believe this is going to be our last question, and we're going to call it quits here. Mage Mail's question is, can your digital salesperson be personalized to each customer? So is that a goal? How similar will it be from customer to customer, and what are maybe the personalization options you'll see for each customer of Farah?
Sorry, 1 second.
Sure. I'll continue rambling over here. I could do it all day. Again, hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell. Join us next week to talk about digital first marketing. The questions here by Mage Mail bring up an interesting topic as far as social retargeting ads. And I'll probably reach out and find someone that specializes in social retargeting ads and get them on the show. So if you know someone that is an expert in that area, hit me up, let me know. I will invite them on to the live stream, and we can go in more depth about that topic. So as far as the question from Mage Mail, it was, can your digital salesperson be personalized to each customer?
Yeah, the answer is yes. So it actually is personalized to every customer. So because it's constantly building a journey of what each customer is doing, it's effectively personalizing the experience for every customer and giving them a unique experience. So no two customers will see the same thing when they hit the product page today, or most customers won't see the same listing page. But as we evolve Farah, it'll be more and more and more the case.
All right, so that's all the questions for the day. We're kind of running up against about an hour and 15 minutes here. So if you have any questions, you're watching this in replay, please post them in the comments of the video. You can only post in the chat while we are live here streaming. Post them in the comments, and I'll reach out to Jay, and I'll try to get you an answer to those questions. I appreciate you watching. Again, pay attention. Next week, we've got a very interesting topic there talking about mobile first. Jay, if anyone wanted to find out more about Farah or Social Proof, how can they get in touch with you?
You can send me an email, jay@farah.ai, or you can just visit the website and use a live chat that's there. And we're almost, you probably get a hold of me that way too. So that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on the live stream. And for those out there watching, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.